Title: The Silent Witness at Door 4C. The tiny red light on the smart doorbell was barely visible in the dark hallway, a small, unblinking eye staring out into the silence of the corridor. It was the only witness awake at 11:42 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday in November. Inside apartment 4C, the world was still. It was a stillness that had been carefully curated, a sanctuary built by a woman who had fought for every inch of her independence. But that sanctuary was about to be breached. In less than 20 minutes, the heavy wooden door, locked, bolted, and secured, would be splintered off its frame. The quiet would be shattered by shouting, by the crash of metal against laminate flooring, and by the terrified pleas of a woman who had done absolutely nothing wrong. What happened that night in the suburbs of Seattle wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just a procedural error, as the police press release would initially claim. It was a collision between a citizen's worst nightmare and an officer's unchecked ego. It was the moment when the irresistible force of state power slammed into the immovable object of human vulnerability. And thanks to that tiny red light on the doorbell camera, 15 million people would eventually watch it happen. They would watch a career end, a department crumble, and a life change forever. But before we step into that hallway, I want to ask you something. We often trust that our homes are our castles, that once we lock the door, we are safe from the chaos of the world. But where are you listening from right now? Are you safe in your own space? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that the truth deserves to be seen, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because what we are about to uncover is a story that proves accountability is only one upload away. Elena Vance lived a life defined by precision. At 31 years old, she was a successful freelance illustrator, creating intricate, fantastical worlds for book covers and video games from her specially adapted workstation in the corner of her living room. Elena had been born with spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that affected her muscle strength and mobility. For the last 10 years, she had navigated the world from the seat of a customized, lightweight titanium wheelchair. To the outside observer, Elena's life might have seemed difficult. To Elena, it was simply her life. She was proud of it. She was proud of the apartment she had retrofitted with her own money, the lowered countertops, the voice-activated lights, the widened doorways. Living at the Meridian, a quiet, mid-range apartment complex, was a milestone she had celebrated 3 years ago. It proved to her parents, who loved her but worried excessively, that she could handle the world on her own terms. That Tuesday had been unremarkable, the kind of day that blurs into memory. She had finished a commission for a fantasy novel cover around 6:30 p.m., the glow of her dual monitors finally fading as she shut down her system. She had heated up leftovers, homemade lasagna, and watched a documentary about deep-sea exploration. By 10:45 p.m., she began her nighttime routine. For most people, going to bed is a matter of falling backward onto a mattress. For Elena, it was a logistical process. It involved positioning her chair, engaging the brakes, using a transfer board to slide across to the bed, and arranging her pillows to support her spine. It took time, it took effort, and once she was in bed, she was there. Reversing the process required energy and focus. By 11:30 p.m., Elena was asleep. Her wheelchair sat empty beside the bed, a silent sentinel. Her breathing was rhythmic and deep. Outside, the autumn rain tapped gently against the windowpane. But 3 floors down and 1 building over, a phone call was being made that would destroy this peace. Mrs. Higgins, a well-meaning but notoriously anxious resident in Unit 3C, directly below Elena, had heard a noise. It was likely a heavy book slipping off Elena's nightstand, or perhaps the settling of the building's old pipes. But in Mrs. Higgins's mind, fueled by too many late-night crime dramas, it sounded like a body hitting the floor. She waited. She heard nothing else. Her imagination filled in the silence. She dialed the non-emergency line, which routed to dispatch. She reported thumping sounds and mentioned she thought a young woman lived up there alone. She used the words possible struggle. Those 2 words, possible struggle, changed the coding of the call. It went from a noise complaint to a welfare check with potential volatility. Officer Mark Thorne was the closest unit. Thorne was a 9-year veteran of the force, a man who had spent the last decade hardening his heart against the excuses of the street. He was 35, broad-shouldered, with a reputation in the precinct for being proactive. In police speak, proactive can mean a lot of things. It can mean diligent, or it can mean aggressive. Thorne viewed himself as a sheepdog in a world of wolves. He believed his instincts were sharper than any training manual. When he saw the call pop up on his computer terminal, welfare check 4C, possible domestic, he didn't wait for a partner. He turned his cruiser around and headed for the Meridian. Thorne arrived at the complex at 11:46 p.m. The dashcam of his cruiser recorded him exiting the vehicle. He adjusted his belt, hitched up his tactical vest, and walked with a purposeful, heavy stride toward the building entrance. He wasn't thinking about a disabled woman. He was thinking about a domestic abuser hiding in the dark. He was thinking about control. He took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was empty, smelling faintly of carpet cleaner and stale air. He walked to door 4C. He didn't look at the small camera lens near the doorframe. He raised his fist and pounded on the wood. Bang! 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 Police! Open up! Inside the apartment, the sound hit Elena like a physical blow. She jolted awake, her heart hammering against her ribs instantly. Disorientation washed over her. Police? Why? She glanced at the digital clock. 11:47. Hello? She called out, her voice thick with sleep. Who is it? Police department. Thorne's voice boomed through the door, muffled but angry. Open the door. We need to check on the welfare of the occupants. Elena's mind raced. Welfare? I'm fine. She felt a spike of panic. She was alone. She was in her pajamas, a thin tank top and shorts. She was in bed. I'm in bed, she shouted back, trying to project her voice. I'm disabled. I need time to get to the door. Please wait. Outside, Thorne heard a voice. It sounded female. It sounded distressed, but he didn't hear disabled. He didn't hear wait. His adrenaline filtered the audio. He heard hesitation. He heard stalling. In Thorne's experience, people who stalled were people who were hiding something, hiding drugs, hiding a weapon, or hiding a victim. Open the door now, ma'am, Thorne yelled, leaning closer to the wood. Do it now. Inside, the nightmare began in earnest. Elena threw off her duvet. Her hands were shaking violently. She grabbed the transfer board. She had to line it up perfectly between the mattress and the wheelchair. If she missed, if she slipped, she would fall to the floor, and she would be stranded. I'm coming, she screamed, tears of frustration pricking her eyes. Please, I use a wheelchair. It takes me a minute. She dragged her body across the board. Her muscles, stiff from sleep, protested. She landed in the seat of the chair with a heavy thud. She quickly adjusted her legs. She disengaged the brakes. Outside, only 45 seconds had passed. To Thorne, standing in the hallway, it felt like 10 minutes. He was pacing now. The silence from inside after the initial shouting made him suspicious. Why is she quiet now? Is someone keeping her from the door? Ma'am, if you don't open this door, I am going to force entry. Elena was spinning her chair around. She rolled across the bedroom, the rubber tires humming on the hardwood. She navigated the turn into the short hallway leading to the front door. Don't break it, she yelled, panic rising in her throat. I'm here. I'm right here. She reached the door. It was a heavy fire door with 2 deadbolts and a security chain. She had installed the extra locks because she lived alone and felt vulnerable. Now, those locks were her enemy. She reached up. Her fingers fumbled with the top deadbolt. Click. 1 down. She reached for the lower lock. Click. 2 down. But then there was the chain. It was high up. She had to stretch her arm, straining her shoulder. I'm unlocking it, she shouted. Just hold on. Thorne heard the clicks, but he also heard the fumbling. He heard the chain rattle. In his mind, he decided that this wasn't someone letting him in. This was someone barricading themselves. Or perhaps the abuser was right there, whispering threats, telling her not to open it. Thorne made a choice. It was a choice born of impatience and a warrior mindset that viewed every closed door as an insult to his authority. He didn't call for a key. He didn't call maintenance. He didn't even try the handle to see if she had unlocked the deadbolts. He stepped back. He planted his left foot, and he drove his right boot into the center of the door just below the handle. The timestamp on the cloud recording was 11:51 p.m. The force of the kick was tremendous. The door jamb splintered with a sickening crunch. The chain lock, the only thing still holding the door, ripped out of the drywall. The door flew inward. Elena was right behind it. She was still reaching for the chain. The heavy, solid core door slammed into the front of her wheelchair. The physics were brutal and immediate. The impact threw the lightweight titanium chair backward as if it were a toy. Elena was launched. She tumbled backward, her head striking the laminate floor, her legs tangling in the frame of the overturned chair. She screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pain and absolute terror. Thorne stepped over the threshold, his hand already on the grip of his service weapon. He scanned the room, looking for the threat. He looked left. He looked right. Then he looked down. There was no hulking boyfriend. There was no intruder. There was only a young woman sprawled on the floor in her pajamas, her legs twisted at unnatural angles beneath the metal frame of a wheelchair, sobbing in agony. Show me your hands, Thorne shouted. It was a reflex. He was too far gone in his tactical mindset to process what he was seeing. You hurt me, Elena gasped, clutching her shoulder. I told you I was in a wheelchair. Who else is here? Thorne demanded, moving deeper into the apartment. He stepped right past her. He stepped over the wheels of her chair, spinning lazily in the air. Is there anyone else in the apartment? No, it's just me, Elena cried. Please, help me up. I can't move. This is the moment that would seal Officer Thorne's fate. This is the moment that would turn a mistake into a malicious act. A reasonable human being, realizing they had just kicked a door into a disabled woman, would stop. They would holster their weapon. They would apologize. They would call an ambulance immediately. Thorne did not do that. He felt the cold wash of embarrassment, but his ego converted it instantly into anger. He felt foolish, and he blamed her for it. Why didn't she open it faster? Why did she have so many locks? You didn't open the door, Thorne snapped, holstering his gun but not offering a hand. I gave you lawful commands to open the door. I was trying, Elena sobbed. I told you I needed time. It took too long, Thorne said dismissively. He began to walk through her apartment. He opened her bedroom door. He looked in her bathroom. He opened the closet. He was conducting a search without a warrant, desperate to find something, anything that would justify his violence. If he could find drugs, if he could find a weapon, then she wasn't a victim. She was a suspect, but there was nothing. Just art supplies, just a custom computer setup, just a neatly made bed. Elena lay on the floor for 7 minutes. The pain in her back was throbbing, a hot red pulse radiating from her spine. She felt exposed, humiliated, and terrified. She watched the boots of the man who had attacked her walk back and forth across her living room rug. Are you going to help me? She whispered, her voice trembling. Thorne stopped. He looked down at her with a look of annoyance. Get up, he said. Stop acting like that. You can get up. I have SMA, Elena said, the tears streaming down her face. I cannot get up without my chair, please. Thorne sighed. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, 4 Alpha 20, code 4, no disturbance, 1 female, uncooperative. Send a second unit for assistance. Uncooperative. That word would hang in the air like smoke. While we wait for that second unit to arrive, I want you to pause and think about the vulnerability of that position. Imagine lying on the floor of your own home, unable to rise, while a stranger with a gun judges you for your own body. It's a nightmare scenario. If you've ever felt unheard or dismissed in a moment of crisis, you know how deep that cut goes. Share your thoughts in the comments. How would you have reacted? Officer Maria Gonzalez was the second unit. She was younger than Thorne, 5 years on the job, but she possessed something Thorne had long ago discarded: empathy. She arrived at the Meridian at 12:05 a.m. She walked down the hallway and saw the splintered door frame. She saw the wood chips scattered on the carpet. She stepped inside. The first thing she saw was Officer Thorne leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone. The second thing she saw was Elena Vance, still on the floor, shivering. Gonzalez dropped her kit bag. She didn't ask Thorne what happened. She didn't check in with her superior. She dropped to her knees beside Elena. Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm Officer Gonzalez. Elena looked up, her eyes wide with shock. Please, she whispered. My back. Gonzalez turned to Thorne, her eyes blazing. Did you call medical? Thorne shrugged. She said she's fine. She's just being dramatic because I popped the door. She is not being dramatic, Mark. Gonzalez snapped. She grabbed her radio. Dispatch, send EMS to my location, priority 1. Female party, fall victim, possible spinal injury. She turned back to Elena. I'm not going to move you until the medics get here, okay? We don't want to make it worse, but I'm right here. You're safe now. Elena nodded, closing her eyes. Tears leaked out from the corners. He kicked the door. I was behind it. Gonzalez looked at the overturned wheelchair. She looked at the door. She did the math instantly. She stood up and walked over to Thorne, lowering her voice to a lethal whisper. You kicked the door while she was answering it. She wouldn't open up, Thorne muttered, crossing his arms. I had probable cause, exigent circumstances. You have a noise complaint, Mark. Gonzalez hissed. That's not exigent circumstances. The paramedics arrived minutes later. They were gentle, professional. They placed a cervical collar on Elena. They lifted her onto a backboard. As they wheeled her out of her own apartment, past the ruined door, Elena looked at Officer Gonzalez. Officer? Yes, Elena. My doorbell, Elena whispered. It's a Sentinel smart cam. It records to the cloud. It saw everything. Gonzalez froze. She looked at the doorframe. There, blinking innocently in the hallway light, was the camera. She looked back at Thorne. He hadn't noticed it. He was busy writing in his notebook, undoubtedly crafting a narrative that would protect him. He didn't know that every second of his exigent circumstances, every word of his dismissal, and the sickening crunch of that door had been uploaded, saved, and backed up to a server in California. Gonzalez nodded at Elena. I'll make sure it's secured. It was the first step toward justice. The video file hit the desk of Sergeant Miller at Internal Affairs the next morning at 8 a.m. Miller was a man who had seen everything in 20 years of policing. He poured his coffee, sat down, and opened the file labeled Vance_Incident_4C. He watched the first minute. He leaned forward. He watched the kick. He winced. He watched the aftermath. He stopped drinking his coffee. By the time the video ended, Miller was rubbing his temples. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He wasn't looking at a bad arrest. He was looking at a lawsuit that could bankrupt the city. He was looking at a PR nuclear bomb. He picked up the phone and dialed the chief directly. "Chief, you need to come down here. We have a massive problem." Thorne was suspended by noon. The department tried to get ahead of it. They released a statement saying they were investigating an incident involving a forced entry. They tried to keep it vague, but Elena Vance wasn't vague. From her hospital bed, where she was being treated for severe bruising and a hairline fracture in her scapula, Elena called her cousin. Her cousin wasn't a lawyer, he was a tech journalist. "Get me the footage," Elena said. "I want people to see." 2 days later, the video was posted to social media. The reaction was not a ripple. It was a tsunami. The footage was visceral. The sound of the kick, the scream. It cut through the noise of the internet. Within 24 hours, it had 3 million views. By 48 hours, it had 15 million. The comment section was a unified roar of outrage. He didn't even try the handle. She told him she was disabled. Why didn't he help her up? Disability rights organizations rallied instantly. They pointed out that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a policing model that viewed compliance as the only metric of innocence and viewed disability as non-compliance. Demonstrators gathered outside the police precinct. They brought wheelchairs. They sat in the lobby, refusing to move, chanting Elena's name. The hashtag #Justice for Elena trended #1 in the country. Officer Thorne became the most hated man in the state. His face was everywhere. His record was dug up by internet sleuths. They found complaints, minor ones, mostly dismissed, about rudeness, about unnecessary roughness. But this video provided the context that those previous complaints lacked. It showed the man behind the badge. In the midst of the storm, Elena filed a federal lawsuit. She hired Robert Sterling, a civil rights attorney known for taking the cases that police unions feared most. Sterling didn't just want a settlement, he wanted a precedent. The legal battle was brutal, but short. The city attorney took one look at the footage and told the mayor, "We cannot go to trial. If a jury sees that video, they will give her the keys to City Hall." But Thorne refused to go quietly. Through his union representative, he argued that he followed protocol. He argued that the stress of the situation caused auditory exclusion, that he physically didn't hear her say she was disabled. The deposition was held in a glass-walled conference room. Thorne sat across from Sterling. He looked defiant. "Officer Thorne," Sterling asked, his voice calm. "In the video, Ms. Vance shouts, 'I'm coming, don't break it.' Do you deny she said that?" "I didn't hear it," Thorne said stiffly. "Okay," Sterling nodded. "And when you entered and saw a woman on the floor with a wheelchair, did you consider that maybe your assessment of the threat was wrong?" "I had to secure the scene," Thorne recited. "From whom?" Sterling asked. "From the woman in pajamas crying on the floor." Thorne stayed silent. "Tell me, officer." Sterling leaned in. "When you searched her drawers, when you looked in her closet, were you looking for a suspect? Or were you looking for an excuse?" Thorne's face turned a deep shade of red. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence spoke for him. The settlement was announced 4 months later. The city agreed to pay Elena Vance $1.2 million. But the money was the least interesting part of the agreement. As part of the settlement, the police department was forced to enter into a binding agreement to overhaul their training regarding interactions with disabled citizens. They had to implement a new wait and assess protocol for non-emergency welfare checks. If there is no immediate evidence of violence, like gunshots or screaming, officers are now required to wait for backup and attempt phone contact before forcing entry. Furthermore, Officer Mark Thorne was fired, not suspended, fired. The internal investigation concluded that he had violated 4 separate department policies, including excessive force and conduct unbecoming an officer. He was stripped of his pension, but the consequences went further. Because of the clarity of the video and the blatant disregard for civil rights, the local district attorney, facing an upcoming election and immense public pressure, did something rare. He charged Thorne with misdemeanor assault and official misconduct. Thorne avoided jail time by taking a plea deal that included probation and a permanent surrender of his law enforcement certification. He would never carry a badge again. 6 months after that Tuesday night, Elena Vance sat in her new apartment. She had moved. She couldn't stay at the Meridian. The hallway held too many ghosts. Her new place was on the ground floor. It had a garden. It was beautiful. She was working again. On her tablet, she was sketching a character, a warrior with armor that was cracked but holding together. Her back still hurt on rainy days. The physical therapy was ongoing, but the psychological scars were the ones that took the most work. For months, a knock at the door would send her heart racing. For months, she couldn't sleep without double-checking the locks 3 times. But she was healing. She rolled over to the window and looked out at the street. She saw a police cruiser drive by slowly. A year ago, she wouldn't have noticed it. Now, she watched it with a different eye. She knew that inside that car was a person with power, and she knew how easily that power could be weaponized. But she also knew something else. She knew that she had power too. The power of truth. The power of standing up, even when you physically can't, and saying, "This is wrong." The Ring camera footage from Apartment 4C is still shown in police academies today. It is used as a failure analysis training module. Young cadets sit in dark rooms and watch Mark Thorne kick that door. They watch Elena fall, and they are asked one simple question: what would you have done differently? And as long as they are asking that question, Elena knows that her pain wasn't for nothing. This story forces us to look at the intersection of authority and vulnerability. It reminds us that technology, while often intrusive, can be the great equalizer. It captures the moments that would otherwise be lost to his word against hers. So I want to leave you with this thought. If that camera hadn't been recording, where would Elena be today? Would she be a successful plaintiff who changed policy? Or would she be a woman with a broken door and a criminal record for resisting arrest? It's a chilling thought. Justice was served in Seattle, but only because the world was watching. If you found this story powerful, please share it. The more people understand these dynamics, the more we can push for the kind of training that prevents the next Mark Thorne from shattering a life. And don't forget to subscribe. We have more stories coming, stories of people who fought back against the odds and won. Stay safe, watch out for your neighbors, and remember, accountability is everyone's job. See you in the next one.